Hello, everybody. Please take your seats. This is the joint work session of the South Kingstown School Committee and the South Kingstown Town Council. Welcome, members from the public. Welcome, School Committee, to the Town Council chambers. This was a long night last year, so we'll try to get right to it. The first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance, though. Please rise and say it. Thank you. And before I ask the town manager to start with his presentation, I know, Rice, you wanted to say a couple words.
Thanks, Abel. Good evening, everyone.
Steve, 1 second. I know that
Steve, I just for 1 second just wanted to let people know why the superintendent isn't here this evening. Her son received quite a prestigious award. He won the defensive MVP for the state for football, and she just found out last week, and she's at that banquet tonight. So Mary Ann is here in her place.
Great, thank you. Congratulations to Kristen. And now, go ahead, Steve.
All right, we'll get started here tonight. As far as the town charter is concerned, there's a requirement for the town council and the school committee to meet principally in the month of December in advance of budget development as a means of discussing where the budget development for the following year is going to go. So things that we want to accomplish tonight is first to provide general information relative to the budget development process itself to make sure that if there are questions, we can answer those. Second is to provide documentation on the budget base that both the school department and the town, what are the starting points? What does it mean as far as projections on property taxes? New types of projects that are under consideration that have not been incorporated into prior budgets on either the town or the school side, as well as what type of contractual obligations are we looking at in terms of personnel contracts that will be impacting the 2016-17 year. And also to ensure that provide an opportunity to solicit comments from the public as to goals and objectives or concerns that they may have that either of the two bodies can take into consideration in advance of putting budgets proposals together. The development process for the budget has been published in the December 10th edition of the Independent. It's also available on the town's website, www.southkingstownri.com. There's also the adoption process in a form to provide general dates that we will be working with. I think key dates that we will be looking at over the next several months are, first, the school committee's presentation of their budget to the manager's office on February 14th is the deadline. We're then looking for the council to hold a series of work sessions on the budget once they receive it on March 1st from the town manager's office. The town manager's budget will incorporate not just the general fund, utility funds, special revenue funds, but will also provide presentation on the school fund as well. We anticipate that through the budget process, there'll be a preliminary budget adoption sometime around March 14th. And in fact, if we jump to the next slide that you've got, you'll see what the projected dates are. Now, last year, I think 4 of the dates were changed based on snowstorms. And we're hopeful that this schedule will be one that works for us this year. But this is a tentative schedule of events. March 14th would show a preliminary budget adoption. We would then look into April for the 13th and the 14th of public hearings that the council and school committee would conduct, and the council would adopt a final budget by the 25th of April. As noted on the chart, we would have a potential for public input on the budget once the preliminary budget was adopted. Any group of 25 qualified electors would have an opportunity to submit a proposal to council and school committee for up and down within the budget, new programs, reductions of programs, reductions on tax requirements, that type of thing. Those would have to be considered individually as a petition in advance of the council adopting a final budget. With that final budget adoption, if people are still not satisfied with what the council and school committee has come forward with, they have an opportunity with 200 signatures to look to amend the council and school fund budgets in an amount not less than $250,000. They can ask to increase it by more than $250,000. They can ask to decrease it. They can ask to increase it within the general fund for municipal purpose. They can ask to increase or decrease it in the school fund as long as it exceeds the $250,000. If, in fact, the 200 signatures are determined as meeting the requirements of the charter, then there would be a referendum held, and it would be the Tuesday following the first Saturday in June. Based on the actions of that referendum, either the council or the school committee, if they were successful, would be required to amend their budgets appropriately to reflect the changes through that public initiative. That's the technical. What I wanted to get into first is to, on a yearly basis, I take a look at the state's revenue estimating conference briefs and taking a look at where they see the community, where they see the state going over the next 6-year period. What they're looking at is really a good future. This is something we haven't seen over the past 8 years. What we're seeing is a prediction for increase in employment of a non-farm nature, and to see that growth continue over the 6-year term in the 1.5 to range on an annual basis. The estimates as far as personal income is also escalating, as well as wages. We've also seen a projection for continued decline within the unemployment rates within the state, and consumer price index staying below the 3% level. I caution on that one. That one concerns me because a lot of what we're seeing now with the 0.7 in 15 and the 1.2 in 16 is directly related to energy prices, particularly the oil prices that have downed the market. We're also looking at the treasuries and going up, and obviously that's because there's an anticipation that there'll be a continuation on the Fed's actions similar to what they took today. This was the eight-year anniversary since they were really at a zero and put it up to the point, the 25 basis points today. That's not really going to have a lot of impact on the economy. It's more symbolic in nature than it will have any type of a profound influence as far as rates that we will be seeing in the municipal market. And most likely, what we will see is the banks reluctantly agreeing to increase somewhat the savings rates, which will not come close to the 25 basis points that their loan values are for prime will be going up. As far as unemployment in South Kingstown is concerned, in looking at the rates, the years 7 through 14 are actual years. And for 15, I'm showing what the effective rate is as of October. So we're down to a 3.7%. There's a good deal of fluctuation. That 3.7, I would think, on a year basis is probably going to be closer to about 5.25. That's the month. But you can see that that we have in the area weathered somewhat of the storm in terms of the of unemployment. I would also caution that the unemployment rate information only looks at people currently looking for jobs. It does not really look at those that are no longer in the job market or who are holding down multiple jobs and not having benefit value available to them. So while the rates have come down statewide as well as in South Kingstown, we're certainly not saying that we're back to I think we're back to a normal rather than a good economic place. If you take it back to 2007 time period, 2008, when things really started to come apart as far as the general economy in the country. When we look at the municipal landscape, a couple of things that we want to make sure that that there's agreement on in terms of really an explanation of things we're looking at a staff level in development of budget. One is that the 4% levy cap, and I say this each year, it is not a goal. It is a cap. What it means is it can't be exceeded. It doesn't mean you should try to get to it. South Kingstown also continues to, based on policy, maintain a target of between 11 and 16.7% of its operating budget having undesignated fund balance equal to that amount. As of June 30th of 2015, the unaudited, and I say unaudited, we really know what the numbers are, but we haven't closed the audit yet. That'll be closed by December 31st, is that we're looking about a $9.96 million undesignated fund balance, or about 13%. So we're right where we want to be. As far as South Kingstown with private pension plans, we have none. There's been a great deal of discussion over the past few years on unfunded liability associated with private pension plans that are run through municipalities. South Kingstown, fortunately, has never been involved with any of the private plans. We have all of our pensions through the state retirement system. And as noted here, as of June 30, 2015, we've got a 13.4% unfunded liability. And I'll show you some chart on that before we're done. One of the other important things is South Kingstown, both municipal and school, on an annual basis is meeting the annual required contribution, or ARC, that's necessary for pensions going forward. And that's a key factor, because many of the communities are still not paying what they need to pay to meet what their pension liabilities are, and also what they need to pay as far as post-employment benefits. When I say OPEB, I'm saying these are for other post-employment benefits. Particularly, it's health care, if there's dental provided, or if there's life insurance provided. Those are the keys that that both municipals see it only on health care for a portion of our employment base. Schools would see it on both life as well as health. I'm not sure about dental. So that's an important factor, because it means that we're not trying to play catch-up as far as our pension payments. We're making the pension payments. In fact, the council earlier this year made a conscious decision to ensure that the amortization period used for pension stayed at 20 years and not used a 25-year period. That would have cost us considerably more dollars over the long, extending it 5 years sounds like a great idea because it lowers the annual cost. But it's just like having a 30-year mortgage. If you try to pay it off in 20 years, you save a lot of interest. So the conscious decision was made. It means our pension payments are consistently a little bit higher than they would have been if we'd gone to a new reamortization schedule, but it was in our best interest to protect the tax base to look at the long term rather than to kick the can down the road. New debt, new bonded debt is planned in the 16-17 year. $4.15 million will go toward the Recreation Center construction project, and $1 million for improvements on school facilities. All of those will be directly discussed in the capital improvement program. I've issued a capital improvement program proposal on behalf of the schools and all of the municipal departments to the council on December 1st. First week of January, we'll begin meeting on those capital improvements, and by the end of January, the council will be in a position, or is required by ordinance, to adopt a capital improvement program. And I'll mention a couple of more things on that as we go along. The apparently the computer likes this page. Frozen. Uh, All right, let's see, we're back. Slide 9.
It did switch to the next page.
Okay, so now is, the next slide talks about some of the preliminary things that we're looking at. One is that in the budget that staff will be developing, we'll be looking at maintaining existing service levels as they were in 15-16. We're also looking at what are the obligations that we have contractually. Each of the labor contracts that we have in place for the municipal side have been put into place. Each of them calls for a 2.25% increase. This computer's a little bit nuts tonight. They call for a 2.25% increase. I think everybody's got copies of the, let me just continue on. The 2.5% will cost about $377,000 in the budget development. We're also looking at about a 3% increase in the cost of health care for the 16-17 year. And I wanted to point out that with that, this 20% co-pays are also continued to be budgeted for all employees obtaining that service. We're also looking at, based on the changes that have been made in the pension plan, with the pension settlement that occurred in August of this year, we'll be seeing increases of about $70,000 in an increased cost associated with those persons participating in the retirement system. We're also looking at debt service cost reduction of about $165,000. And right now, the budget that I presented as a capital program for the 16-17 year had an increase of $191,000. I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to maintain that. What I've done is to show it as a $91,000 increase, meaning that we have to do one of two things: either reduce programs, accelerate for current year to be able to do that because it won't fit within the overall framework of the budget that we'd like to prepare. But we'll make those adjustments. It's important to note that anything we talk about tonight is in its very, very formative stage. We are really 2 months away from being able to make good decisions and having the better data available to be able to give you a budget. Tonight is just to give you an idea of the things that we're seeing and the things that we know that we're going to have to work on. CapBud is one that we'll have to work on. Most likely the schools will have to look at theirs as well based on the funding availabilities that we'll have. We're also looking that if the rec center project goes forward with a start date of January 1st of 2017, there would be a 6-month operation on that facility, or a requirement of another $190,000 in supports to operate that program. In the budget development, we're looking at attempting to minimize any type of property tax transfer to the schools at the 2.5% range. In the past, we've been at 2%, and once we've gone through budgets, we've been down as low as 1 or to 0 going back 5 years ago. So as a starting point, instead of using the 2 that we used last year, I'm anticipating a need to at minimum start at a 2.5% range. On page 10 of the document, we talk about new initiatives. When I talk about new initiatives, these are projects that the council has discussed either through the development of their goals and objectives or in terms of initiatives that they feel they wanted additional information on. There's been extended discussions relative to what's the cost if there were additional sidewalk snow removals incorporated into the 16-17 year, if more money were incorporated into the capital program dealing with redevelopment issues of the beach. When we talk about redevelopment, it's really trying to recapture what we've lost through the erosion with sitting areas, shade areas, as well as proper paths and access to the beach pavilion that's been relocated. Other issues include community sustainability, with a cost of about $100,000 if we were to employ an individual that would be responsible for developing that type of a program. Council's also had a number of requests relative to going to a live broadcast for council meetings. We've developed cost estimates for that. And the council's also been interested in looking at what the value of veteran exemptions and whether those should be increased. And if so, what would the cost of that be and over what period of time? So those are items that are still on the table. The slide 11 talks about some of the concerns that we have on the revenue side. One is that the town plans to maintain the $3,000 a vehicle exemption. As you recall, a couple of years ago, it had dropped down to $500. This was when the state decided it was not going to provide the reimbursement any longer. So we would maintain current status that we've had over the past several years. There would be no change. We would assume that we're still only going to get reimbursement from the state at $500, even though we're using the $3,000 value. We're not seeing non-property tax revenues escalate very much. Maybe a 1% increase. That we'll see. We'll develop and refine that documentation over the next 8 weeks. State aid education is also looked at as maybe a $50,000 increase, which would be related to either hotels or meals tax. We don't see anything else increasing. In fact, I want to talk about that in a couple of minutes because there's about a $144,000 item, which was a revenue that was developed 3 years ago. It was supposed to be a 3-year program. If it's discontinued, we're going to lose $144,000 of that state aid. So until we see the governor's budget or get some indication from state administration, we're concerned on level of funding on aid to education. This is on the municipal side. Mary Ann will deal with the school side. Unassigned fund balance, we continue to reduce the amount of undesignated funds that go into the next year's budget. We're going to continue that in the budget development by another $125,000. One of the other things we look at is what's the value of the tax roll increasing with new development construction. Right now, last year we did about a 1% increase, which totals out at about $40 million. If that occurs, it generates $620,000 in taxes. If it doesn't occur, obviously we're going to lose that. If it drops down to 0.5%, that 620 becomes 310. So that's an important number until we see what it looks like at the end of the year. I will note that we're in a revaluation year, so when I say a 1% increase, the 1% is natural growth in terms of new construction that's occurring in the community. I would anticipate with a revaluation, when it's completed, we'll probably see about a 5% increase in tax values. But I'm not going to present that here because it doesn't, it's going to affect what the tax rate is. The tax rate may drop, but the number of tax dollars is still being collected. So it's much better to use the same base. So what I'm presenting here is if there were no revaluation, we'd probably see a 1% increase. If we have the revaluation, which we will have, the $15.52 rate is no longer that rate. We'll have to restate that rate so we can see what the true impact would be to the taxpayer. The next sheet on 12 is really just a series, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I think there's some important numbers for people to understand how budgets go. This I put together to look at a 5-year history as to where we were 5 years ago to where we are in the 15-16 year. You can see one of the major things that's here is that you see reductions in local revenues, reductions in fund balance, because we went from 5 years ago putting $1.2 million in, now we're down to $675. When we look at the local revenues, there's been a little bit of a loss in there as we saw real estate conveyance taxes go down. those types of things, we see reductions have occurred. You can see that there's some increase on state aid, but that increase on state aid, about $50,000 a year, is directly related to the development of the meals tax and the hotel tax expansions that have occurred. The big increase that you have there on property taxes is you've got an average increase of property tax of only 1% per year over the 5-year period. That is when we consider that the cap is 4, we're at 25% of the cap. And that's both on the muni side and on the school side. On the expenditure program, we can see that the schools have picked up an average of $480,000 a year over that 5-year period, and we've picked up on the municipal side in the area of $490,000. One of the big issues that we're looking at is, you can see, the debt service. Town debt and school debt has declined by about $2 million over the 5-year period, or about $400,000 a year. That's provided great relief to us in terms of being able to minimize the amount of property tax increase. Once you stabilize the debt service, and it's no longer going to be going down $400,000 a year, then you see more pressure being brought on the current year property tax need. That goes up. The next sheet just looks at a couple of things. Where do the property taxes go in terms of municipal or school share? And we can see that 5 years ago, the schools were taking 76.3%, and now it's down to 74.8%. A lot of that's because of the major losses the town experienced with the state aid to education, as we saw on the previous page. The tax rate distribution, that's really unimportant here because we've had 2 revaluations during that period of time, so it changes the base each time, so I'm not going to spend any time on that one. The next sheet looks at your tax roll. A lot of times people will say to me, well, where does the money come from the property tax? Is it coming from the residential base? Is it coming from the commercial base? Here you can see on the 15-16 year, this is current year, that you've got almost 84% of your tax roll is residential, and you're generating about 83 cents of every dollar from the residential base, about 11 cents from commercial. And one of the big numbers that we have is you got about 7% is coming from motor vehicles. So if we see a major change in the motor vehicle taxation legislation, which has been threatened over the past few years, that could also have an adverse impact on the development of next year's budget. Property tax roll. This one, this is where I think the roll will go. Here I'm showing real growth of 1% and revaluation growth of 4%. So we would see the roll go from about $4.18 billion to about $4.4 billion. With that, you'll see the rate go down, but obviously you're not reducing the amount of taxes that are going to be collected. Right now, the average house in South Kingstown, residential structure, family unit, is valued at an average of $330,000. So for every 10 cents you raise the tax rate, for every 10 cents you raise it, you see about a $33 yearly increase for that house. So you can see it multiplies quite quickly. When we look at the town's experience to date, you can see that over the last 5 years, we've had an average of a 0.92% increase in taxes. That's probably one of the lowest in the state. Again, some of it is directly associated with austere programming, but more importantly, also with the reductions in the debt service. I put this chart together. This is the first time I've presented this. I went in and I looked at the state data to take a look at, people say to me, well, why are we different from other communities? Well, every community has its own story. You can see that as far as assessment values in South Kingstown, they're higher than they are in North Kingstown. You say, well, gee, that seems like North Kingstown's very low. Well, understand a major portion of their real estate is tax exempt because it's at Quonset, so it's under payments in lieu of taxes. So I present this just to give you an idea. When you see that the values in Narragansett, even as small as Narragansett is with a population, about a third of what ours is, or actually about almost a half of what ours is, has a higher assessment value and a higher taxable roll than South Kingstown does. And what we also look at is, well, where does the money come from? So in South Kingstown, we got 80% from residential. North Kingstown only has 76, but again, some of that's because of the commercial and industrial concerns within Quonset. Westerly, with the waterfront properties, you're seeing about 84%. Charleston certainly much higher than that, where there's very little industry, and Narragansett similar to Charleston. You can also see the differentials on tax rates for each of the communities. Remember, because each base is different, it's not because yours is at 15 and theirs is at 10 that you're paying 50% more than they are. It's a case of you have to look at the assessment values that they actually have. I think the most important thing is what is the sourcing of revenue. And you can see that when you take Rhode Island as a whole, most of the property taxes in this state do come from residential. Where we're a little bit off would be in the commercial, but that's based on the zoning that has been, consciously developed within the community in terms of the limitation on available land for those types of non-residential purpose. That also creates greater tension and pressure on the residential base. The next sheet on 18 is also one that I wanted to take a look at. People say to me, well, if you're going to borrow more money, what's that mean? How is that related to other communities? First, we looked at the tax levy, and then we look at the percentage increase. This is what we talked about. We were up last year 0.78. North Kingstown was up 2.3. Westerly was up 1.8. Charleston 1.8, and Narragansett 2.9. Overall, in Rhode Island, the increase was at 1.64, so we're well below, almost at half what the state level was for that. When we look at our tax per capita, when we look across Washington County, we're seeing that we're at the low point. So there's less taxes on a per-person basis than what you're seeing in those other communities. When you look at our bond rating, South Kingstown's bond rating is the only community in Washington County with a AA1 rating. When we look at debt level is an important characteristic as to where a community is going and what flexibility it has in terms of being able to deal with its infrastructure and expansions of its capital plan. As you can see, we are extremely low in relation to what a North Kingstown or a Westerly may be, and you can see on a per capita basis where we stand. This data was from the 2013 assessment year for the 14-15 year. This is all data that I can collect from different state reports, so it comes from different sources. When we look at per capita income and we look at median family income, it's relatively constant across the state, but it shows that this chart shows us to be in good financial condition in relation to our sister or brother communities. The tax roll for next year, I've talked about it. I'm estimating a 5% increase. Again, I am not estimating any increases in motor vehicle because that is just too difficult to estimate. As you can see, in 13-14, it was at 186 million. It went up to 256, only went up 10,000 the following year. So at this point, until we get a first run in February, we won't have a good idea of what that is. So we're looking at 1% growth due to new property, 4% in terms of reval, and no growth on the motor vehicles. That's how we'll be putting the initial foundation budget together. And again, we'll make a number of adjustments, more than Trish will want to admit to before we're done. The motor vehicles, I've mentioned it, I'm not going to spend any time on it. The effort is going to be made to change the legislation from a clean retail value to a trade-in value. That could have as much as a 10% discount on a number of motor vehicles. If it did happen, let's say that it was worth 10%. And I'm just throwing that out. I'm not saying it's worth 10. It could be worth 20. It could be worth 2. I'm saying that when you look at it, if it were a 10%, based on the size of the roll that we use for motor vehicles, it could be worth about $360,000. So it's one of those open items that we have to keep on the table and be conscious of so that we don't get caught at a later time. This decision won't be made probably until June, and most likely if it is made, what it would occur is that it would be stepped in over a multiple year period. So while I don't think it would be worth the 362, if it's phased in over a 5-year period, it's still going to have impact on us. So it's something that we have to keep in front of us in budget development discussions. Pro forma budget, the 2016-17 year budget will be the first time that the municipal budget is going to be presented separate from the school budget. By that I mean last year we showed a budget of $75 million. We're now going to be showing a municipal budget of $23,208,000 if the pro forma were to occur. That means about a 2.5% increase within each of the departments. As a universal, we would need about $618,000. Of that $618,000, we'd also be looking at about $643,000 in property tax effort that would be necessary. When we look at the expenditure side, again, it's the same $23 million. It also calls for the reduction of $100,000 in the capital improvements. If I can get some of the operating departments below the 2.5%, I may not have to make that type of a recommendation to you as we go forward. So again, this is a fluid process at this point, but to be able to give you numbers that are somewhat credible, we've provided this type of a forecast. I don't want to take a lot more time, but let me go through as far as the tax levy. When we put the tax levy together for the 16-17 year, we're really going to be looking at 6 distinct factors that make up that tax levy. One would be the municipal tax, which is the general fund. 2 would be the town is setting up its a debt service fund. So there's going to be a town debt service cost, and there's going to be a school debt service cost. There's also going to be the need for, we're going to set up a reserve, a capital reserve fund to operate the recreation center. If that were the case for the 6-month period, you'd need $189,000. All told, there's $17.1 million that would be needed on the municipal side, and an additional $52.3 million on the school side if they were looking at a 2.5% increase. That would mean that we would, at this point, if that worked out, you'd have a 2.78% increase in the levy. Again, my target is 2.5, and I'm over it with just the raw numbers that we're looking at. So we've got a lot of work that will be in front of us. I don't think it's insurmountable, but a lot of it's going to depend on if there's new programs that are added to the budget, or what type of service requirements the school program will need to undertake. The pie chart just gives you the percentages. You know, we would still have about 74.2% at school, and munis would be looking at about 23% of that total 16-17 forecasted budget. When I look at what would the implications be, if we had that 1% increase, we didn't have revaluation, we had the budget come exactly to the dollars I've just shown you, and the schools were only taking 2.5%, we would be looking at about a 28-cent property tax increase. When I look at a 28-cent tax increase, if there were no growth in the roll, let's say that 1% didn't exist, it would actually be 44 cents. So, now because you're looking at about $1.85 million in new taxes on that program, of which $600,000 would be coming through the new property that was developed. So the effective impact on the existing tax base is the 28 cents. Again, it's at the 2.7% level. It's higher than what our target would be. We'll work with that. Just as far as the straight numbers, if we had the tax roll at the $4.2 billion level, every penny generates $42,000, every 10 cents, $420,000, and so forth. So you can see, you get some big numbers very quickly when people start saying, well, gee, we could use $500,000 more. $500,000 more is going to cost, cost about 13 cents. And again, you keep factoring that on a $330,000 residential house, and it has some potential for impact on a fragile tax base. The next thing I wanted to show is just the state aid. I've already addressed it. You can see here the incentive aid, which is the second line down. That $145,000 was a 3-year program that the previous governor had put into effect for municipal government. Hopefully, the governor will continue that 3-year program for a 4th year. If she were to remove that from the budget, that impact would be a loss of that $145,000. Most of the other revenues are pretty well founded. I'm not expecting much of a change on any of those. Meals may go up a bit, hotel may go up a bit, but at the 750 level, the meals is that we'd be pushing it. So it's one that we'll have to continue to watch. And you can see, in 2008, we were getting over $4 million from the state. And now we're down to less than $2 million. And this is one of the reasons that we've seen so much of an emphasis and increases as far as the real estate tax in the state of Rhode Island, is this type of a loss of the revenues. As far as our debt service, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at, council authorized earlier this year, setting up a debt service fund. In other words, we're going to take the debt service, both school and town, out of the general fund, and we're going to put it into a separate fund so it'll have its own budget. We'll show all of the expenditures and all of the revenues that come in, third-party revenues such as the aid to housing for the schools, or the impact fees that go against the various municipal programs, or the impact fees for school purpose. All of those will be taken out of the general fund, put into the debt service fund. What we're also going to be proposing for the first year with that debt service fund is a leveling of debt service. In other words, one of the things we've seen with the declining $400,000 a year is we've been able to minimize property tax impacts. What we're going to see now is in the opposite direction. As we bond for the $4.15 million on rec center, and we bond for the schools going forward with the laddered $4 million that's still out there, we're going to see increases in debt service. So what we don't want to do is to continue to see a decline in what the annual debt service payment is, and then have to spike that up, because it'll have an impact on those taxes in those years that the spike would occur. If we level fund the debt both on the school side and the municipal side to what it was in the 15-16 year, what I'll be able to do is to hold assets within that debt service fund as a means of having it so that when we have a higher year, we'll be able to use fund assets to be able to minimize the impact on taxes. So again, what I'm trying to do is to take whatever spikes would occur, and when we do long-term planning and we can plan these things in advance of the years, we can try to better protect the taxpayer from those type of high years or low years. And this is the first drafting of where we think we will go with that. The debt service fund will look something like this on page 30. You can see that we'll be looking at In the current year, our debt service payment for the school, for the municipal side was $866,000 budgeted. We'll budget $850. For the schools, the adopted was 1.5. We're looking at taking that to 1.4 because there'll only be $1 million that we'll be putting out in 16, 17, so we don't really need to do sizable adjustments. But we'll take a look at that again before we finish the overall budget itself. It's important to note that the only thing that the debt service fund will house will be town or municipal debt and education debt, because all of the debt associated with our enterprise funds for water, wastewater, solid waste, or for the guild, the debt service is paid for out of those funds. They're not subject to any property tax impact. The only property tax impact on debt is from municipal debt and from school debt, net of whatever revenues come in. Capital budget, I've spoke to that issue. I'm not going to spend any time on it. We're going to start that review first week in January. Municipal retirement, I mentioned earlier that we're now at an 86.6% funded ratio. The only one that I'm still concerned with is the police. We're still below the target of 80, and we expect that we'll be back over the 80% over the next several years. You can see that we were up at 93.9% back in 2009, and there was a decline. The decline was based on the change in actuarial assumptions that were being used by the state. At one point, they were using an 8% return on investment. They dropped that to 7.5. When you drop that to 7.5, take it out over a 30-year period, the unfunded liability escalates. Same thing happened when they started looking at mortality rates. The ones that they were using were out of balance with what experience was showing over a 10-year period. So what they did is they said people were going to live longer. Well, obviously, if they're going to pay a pension an extra 2 years for 50 people, you're going to have greater liabilities. All of those different assumption changes occurred up through the time in 2014 when the major pension changes were made. That's when we dropped down to the 84%. There was litigation. The litigation was resolved. We're now at 86%, 86.6% for the 3 funds that we operate. This is not inclusive of the teachers. The teacher fund is still funded ratio. It's not on a local basis. Teacher retirement is statewide. At this point, it's funded at about 58%. So there's some major work that's going to still be necessary to do over a 30-year term. In fact, I think there's 21 years left on that reamortization period for them to catch up. But at 58%, it's well below what target should be. All of these pension plans should be funded at no less than 80%. Right now, COLA isn't allowed unless the plans are over 80%. So any of our police contingent that are retired will only see COLA once every 3 years rather than every year until that plan gets above 80. But in relation to those communities that have got unfunded liabilities on private pension plans, we are in a very good position. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we're looking at, based on a 2.25% salary increase with everybody, with the contribution rates being set for the 16-17 year as shown on this chart, we'd spend about $70,000 more than we are currently spending to be able to meet that responsibility, and that's 100% of what needs to be met. Last item I mentioned already, undesignated fund balance. Undesignated fund balance at about 13%, middle range of the target that we've used, and we're looking at that 13 being there again in the end of the current fiscal year, and we're looking at where we would finance $550,000. That would be going into the 16-17 year from that fund balance, and also a need for council consideration of using another $250,000 to fund rec center. Rec center is going to be part of the discussions with the capital budget. It'll also be part of a general town council meeting if, in fact, we get to a recommendation for an award of contract on that facility. That should be coming, we should be able to get that information to the council in mid-January. So with that, one of the things we look at is, well, what's your undesignated fund balance been over the last 5 years? Are you consistently hitting your targets? And you can see we've been ranging between the 9.6 and the $10 million. The line graph that's here shows it as the percentage of the general fund budget. So we've stayed consistently in the 13% range as well. So all told, that's the end of my presentation. These are the things that we'll have to look at, and certainly that we would be looking for advice from the general public or from the council. This is not going to be a simple year. We've been very fortunate to stay at the 1% levels or below 1%. I'm targeting at the 2.5 at this point. And even with the general targets that we're using, we're a bit over that at this point. But over a 2-month period, I think that we should be able to, with everybody's cooperation, get to a point where we can present a reasonable budget to the body. With that, I answer any questions that anybody has at the council or school committee tables.
Steve. Questions for Steve at this point? Unless anybody else has questions. We'll just go through the school committee's budget and
Okay.
hold questions to the end.
Good to go?
Ready to go. You ready to go? Thank you. This evening, I'm here to present to you our pro forma and our anticipated budget process that we'll be going through for the next fiscal year. Okay. Great, thank you. The school committee budget discussion is basically made up of 3 components: the mission statement of the schools, the demographic achievement data, as well as the budget data. Anticipated outcomes of this particular meeting is the town council school committee will give directions to myself and the superintendent of schools, as well as the rest of the administration, as it relates to building the budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
Not getting it?
The mission of the South County School Department is to partnership with families and the entire education community to educate and engage all students in knowledge and skills necessary to ensure readiness and success in college and career. Some of the demographic information as relates to South Kingston schools. We have seen in this current year an increase in what we call our English language learners. Last year, we had about 25 students, less than 0% or about 0%. This year, we've seen an increase to about 47 students, which is about 1% of the total school population. State average in this particular area in 2014 was 6%, and now in 2015, it's 7%. So we're seeing across the state an increase in what we call our English language learners. As it relates to poverty and free and reduced lunch students, in fiscal year 2015, we've seen a 19%. State average is 47%. We are seeing a trend. We'll probably stay at the 19%. The next slide shows the different ELL English language learners as of October 1st, 2015. As you can see, most of these students have a number of different languages that they do speak and that we need to provide the educational service for these students. Our special populations, what we call our special populations, are students that are receiving special ed. Last year, the current fiscal year, we're looking at about a 12% students receiving special ed. That has pretty much been the norm for the past couple of years. State average in Rhode Island has been about 15%. Nationally, we usually see about 12.9%. So we are under the state average and also under the national average slightly. This next slide shows the poverty rates at our schools. As you can see, both Peasdale, the higher ones that we have are Peasdale, the Wakefield, and also the high school. I'm sorry, West Kingston. Wakefield was above it. West Kingston, Peasdale, West Kingston, both are at 22%, and the high school is at 20%. The columns next show us the special ed rates by school, with Peasdale being 14, Wakefield being 12, West Kingston being 12, and Wakefield being 16. You can keep those two straight. High school graduation, we do not have our current year graduation rates. We do anticipate getting those graduation rates for the students that graduated as of last June. We'll have that information sometime probably this month. However, our graduation rates in recent years has slightly increased. As of 2014, we were at 91.5%. We'd like to remind folks that graduation rates and requirements of each individual school district is slightly different. Keep in mind that the credit requirement here in South Kingston is one of the highest that we do have in the state of Rhode Island. This graph shows the increase that we've seen in graduation rates over the past few years. A couple of weeks ago, the school district received some very good news as it relates to the POC assessment. The good news that we did receive, there are 171 elementary schools that took the POC, and we are pleased to let folks know that both Peasdale and Wakefield School ranked 1 and 2 in the state. McTunick was number 5, and West Kingston was number 8 as it relates to the literacy portion of the POC exam. In regards to the math, Peasdale was also ranked number 1, Wakefield number 3, Matunic number 4, West Kingston number 9. That puts, on the math side, it puts all 4 of our elementary schools in the top 10 in the state. We are also pleased to report we've seen similar good results at the elementaries, at the middle school level. 61 middle schools participated in the POC exam this year. And we're pleased to report that Broad Rock ranked number 7 and Curtis Corner was number 10 on the literacy side. On the math side, Broad Rock number 5, Curtis Corner number 12. The high school scores, our high school also ranked 18 out of the 59 high schools for the literacy. As far as the math, we ranked number 7 out of the same 59 high schools. So overall, we're very pleased with the results of the first year of the POC exams for our students in our school districts. The budget preparation for this year, I'm probably going to echo some of the things that Mr. Alfred also echoed. What we take into consideration is our pension rates, also the grants that we do get federal grants during the year, our charter enrollment, district FTEs and enrollment, kindergarten enrollment based on projection, and also actual. Also, we'll be looking at the trends of state aid. Keep in mind that we're in the 6th year of the funding formula, and we still continue to have a drop in our state aid. We also take a look at budget history, expenditure history over the last 3 to 5 years, revenue assumptions, which I'll get into more detail, expenditure assumptions, and we'll look at some of the pro forma and potential property tax transfers that we do anticipate in the upcoming fiscal year. The pension trends is what's outlined in the next chart. This says estimated for the 16-17 year for certified teachers is at 14.09%. Non-certified is 12.7%. We just received the rates today via email as to what they'll be, and they're only, the certified rate is slightly less, and the non-certified rate is slightly more. So the estimates you do see here are well within what we anticipate those expenditures will be for the upcoming fiscal year. Federal aid or state federal aid, which is also called the Consolidated Resource Plan. We get funding from 4 different sources, 4 different grants. One is Title I for the economically and educationally disadvantaged students. Title II is teacher quality. It's mostly professional development. IDEA is special ed, and IDEA preschool is also another grant. Total grants we budgeted and received and were granted this current fiscal year is $1.67 million. Next fiscal year, we're anticipating a slight drop of about $22,000 specifically in the Title I as well as the Title II, dropping the estimate to $1,653,000. As it relates to these grants, we will not have a grant award and know how much we will be receiving until the latter part of June or also the beginning of July. Charter school enrollments. Since 2006, we have seen a steady decline in our charter school enrollment. This current academic year, we did see a slight increase in the number of students attending charter schools. That increase is by 6, and that is broken down mainly by the Green School, which is a high school in the Alton Jones campus. Near Alton Jones, we've seen an increase by 2. And then Kingston Hill Academy, we've seen an increase by 4. We will be watching those numbers as we go through the rest of the academic year because we do see some students come and go on the charter schools as the academic year progresses. Enrollment versus FTEs. The enrollment in the school district continues to decline. We've seen a decline for a number of years. This goes back to 08-09. If we go back further, we will also see continued decline. We've gone from 3,591 students down to about 3,253 students, and that's as of October 1st. The numbers also include our out-of-district students. Those are the students who are placed out of district because of their needs. The change has been about 338 students, or 9.41%. We've also, during that same time frame, have seen a drop in our FTEs. The FTEs have gone from 589.6 to 490.95, or a 98.65 drop, or 16.73% drop. Just a reminder that this number represents an actual FTE count. It doesn't mean it's the actual bodies, it's FTEs. Also, what we need to keep in mind, sometime as it relates to staffing, there are some laws that dictate, as relates to special ed, that we may need to increase staff that we usually don't anticipate doing, or decrease in staff accordingly as students move in and out of the district. What we did see this year, which was very interesting to all of us, and we did not anticipate this, the kindergarten enrollment for this academic year, we have an enrollment of 177 students. NESDEC, which projects our enrollment over a period of time, the projection was 177. The actual enrollment was 197. NESDEC projected the 177. We did see 197, which is an increase of 20. Usually we don't see such an increase, so this was something we had not anticipated. Also, the birth rate back in 2010, which would be these kindergarten students, was 186 South Kingston residents, and yet we're seeing 197. So we will be watching these enrollment numbers in the coming years to see if this is a trend or anomaly just for this particular year. State aid, as I said earlier, we are in the 6th year of the funding formula. Projected state aid is $7.3 million. There is a committee or commission that the governor formed to look at the funding formula. The commission, I think, is made up of 30 people at this point. Originally, it was our understanding that they were probably going to focus on charter schools and some of the costs associated that public schools, that charter schools do not have as it relates to preschools, special ed, out-of-district transportation, private school textbooks and transportation. It has recently come to our attention that they also are starting to look at ELL students, and they're considering the weighting of those students. As I said earlier, we are seeing an increase of ELL students, but some of the other communities are seeing significant increases of ELL students, so that weighting could have a financial impact in our state aid to education. We have been advised by RIDE that this commission is scheduled to present their report in the early part of January. It was originally supposed to be the end of December. Now it's the early to mid-January. And there could be potential impact to the current budget that we are currently working on. We've also been advised that the pie will not get any bigger. The pie for state aid to education will not get any bigger. However, the slices may be a little different. So we will be watching this very closely, because if they do consider weighting the English language learners and they keep the pie the same size, there's a potential that we may lose additional state aid. This chart depicts our state aid percentage over the last few years. The budget history has been pretty consistent, starting at about 57 up to $59 million in the 5-year period of time. As we stated with the revenue assumption, we do look at the funding formula, student enrollment, group home aid. We do anticipate that also dropping. That's part of state aid. The group home aid that we do receive does not cover the cost of the students that we educate that are residents of the group home. The undesignated fund balance, it's estimated that we apply about 14.7% of our fund balance to the revenue for this upcoming budget year. That 14.7% is an estimate based on the fund balance that we know as of this point. As Mr. Alfred said, we have not closed the fiscal year, but I think that number is fairly close. Medicaid reimbursement, we have seen a significant drop in that over the years. Last year, we projected $525,000. We received only $495,000. This current budget year projection and pro forma, we'll be looking at dropping that to about $500,000 from the $525,000. Some of the expenditure assumptions, all contracts are currently negotiated. We will not be negotiating any new contracts this current year. The NEA South Kingston is looking for a 2.25% salary increase. They also, keep in mind, they also get step increase, which has a financial impact to the budget. Co-shares is scaled based on what step these folks are at. A 1 to 3 step, they pay 15%, 4 to 6, 17, 7 to 8, they pay 18, and steps 9, 10, they pay 20%. Para-union also will be looking at a 2.25% salary increase. They also get steps, so we will have some increases there. The co-share for that union group is at 15%. Council 94, which is our custodial and maintenance staff, also will be receiving a 2.25% increase. Their co-share also is 15%. They also receive step increase, however, because since the number of those folks is relatively small, the financial impact is minor in comparison to the other groups. As it relates to materials, we're projecting a 0% increase in materials. However, the schools will be receiving more funding in materials and supplies. We base it on a per pupil cost for their peer count. So the enrollment has dropped, so we will see they will have the opportunity to have some increase there. However, because of the fact we're seeing a decrease in the enrollment, we can budget that at 0%. Health insurance this year, as Mr. Alford said, as more data comes in with some of the information, these numbers may change. But currently, we're projecting about a 6% increase in our health insurance this current fiscal year. Our claims experience, we are in a self-insured environment, and our claims experience this current year have been a little higher than, and running higher than what the trends have been. Dental, we anticipate a 4% increase. I think that may drop based on the recent numbers I did receive. Utilities, we're increasing by 6%. Most of that is related to fuel oil. And also the adjustments for tuitions, both special ed, Charahoe, and charter schools. Charahoe will be about $20,000, $20,780. Charter schools were projected at $14,173. Both have been increased by about 3% for this current fiscal year. The capital plan has been as presented and proposed that we submitted, and it was approved by the school committee back in September. What the pro forma looks like for the school department, we did it over a percentage ranging from 0 to 4%. The state aid federal revenue is at $7.3 million. Other revenues at $1.1 million. The property transfer does increase over each of the different percentages as presented, the 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Expenses based on the pro forma that has been put together as of this point is $60,908,535. The last line shows based on how much the property tax transfer is to the school, or what we anticipated being to school, is the necessary budget adjustment we will be making as we move forward with this budgeting process. Property tax transfers in recent years has increased over the recent years. There was a period of time that we did receive 0%. However, in recent years, we have seen an increase, which has been very beneficial to the school district as we've provided the services to our students. And the next one just shows the graph of the property tax transfers that have taken place since 2006. That pretty much concludes the presentation from the school department. As Mr. Alford said, I'll be happy, or can't committee and or the council meeting.
Thank you. Are there any, excuse me, are there any questions from the council for the school committee? Go for it, Jeff.
I have a question. The per pupil costs, do you have the per pupil costs for our district? And
the per pupil cost as of last year was $17,005, I think it was. We have not received that information. That information is a year old. We anticipate getting that number relatively soon.
okay. And the ranking in the state as well?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
We didn't include that slide because the information was the same as last year.
Any other questions?
I haven't looked closely at your hard numbers here, but can we have an update on the dual language program in the one-to-one technology?
The dual language program is going extremely well at the two schools that it's currently at. We anticipate and we intend to budget for next fiscal year. The program will continue at both the Peasdale and the West Kingston schools. At this point, it's not the intention to expand that program in any of the other elementary schools. The one-to-one program also is going extremely well. We have received a lot of positive feedback from both staff, teachers, and students. We've had little to no damage to or breakage with the particular devices. What the high school has done, it has purchased a software program called Bright Bytes. And what that does, 3 times a year, it surveys both staff and students in regards to the usage at home, in regards to classroom, teachers using it in the classroom. And based on the information on the first survey, we've seen a lot of positive feedback from both students and teachers.
And is there any thought of going from laptops to tablets?
No, not at this point. Next year, we will be budgeting for the new freshman class coming in, and we'll stick with the same devices. We have chatted with some other school districts that are using the tablets or the Chromebooks, and they have seen more breakage and problems. So we will be staying with that.
I'm curious about the dual language immersion. What is the plan for them as they go into middle school and high school?
That we will continue the program, and once they get to the high school, because at that point they'll finish their educational as relates to the specific language that they take in the Spanish, and hopefully they will look to take other languages once they get to the high school.
I'm just curious how that'll work in the middle school. Will there be new staff at that school as they evolve? I mean, right now, I gather we're going to have to hire new teachers each grade as they go up. I'm just curious, when they get to the middle school, where you'll need a math teacher and a, various science teacher, you'll need these specific teachers.
So in the planning process, we'd look at a team, because we have teaming at the middle
Right.
school, we'd look at a team to be the dual language immersion team. And so the content is taught both in the target language, and in this case it would be Spanish.
So you'll continue to add these teachers as it progresses.
Add them, or would we replace them with bilingual teachers as they, phase out either retirement or whatever, or we move people, so that one team becomes the Spanish team.
Okay. So it's projected then this will go until 8th grade, and then in the high school, they'll...
The hope is that they would take college-level courses once they get to the high school and get college credential for the language. That's how it's worked in other school systems across the nation.
By the way, this is Pauline Lisi, the Assistant Superintendent.
And there is special certification for these teachers then. Is it different for the middle school than the elementary?
I would think so. Right now, so at the end of last year, we found out that there was new certification for the DLI program. So we have to have our English-speaking side to be certified, as well as our Spanish bilingual teachers. So I would think, like at this point, we don't know that from RIDE, but I would think down the line, yes, that there would have to be certification where there would be bilingual in the content area.
Hi, I was just wondering, so just to clarify on what Joe said, there's no, in this budget, no expansion of the dual language immersion program. Is that correct? No budget?
Correct.
Okay. Of course, yeah, but I mean, not to go to the other elementary schools.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I noticed, so the charter school students increased just slightly this year. Do we have a system in place to figure out why students leave for charter schools? Or is it, is there any data on that?
We don't have any formal system or data in place as to why a parent or family may choose to send their students to charter schools. What we do here sometimes is anecdotally. Sometimes the charter school may have a program that's unique and different than what they can find at the regular public schools.
I have one. If I can. Hey there. Last year, when we had these discussions, I had concerns about the level of staffing in our libraries. It was really surprising to me at the time that we don't have a librarian at all times in each school, because to me that I would have just assumed it was the case. There was new legislation just signed yesterday, and it was quite exciting, and it just stressed the importance of libraries and librarians in our schools. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It was quite exciting. I read it this morning, and considering this new legislation, I'm wondering how that will impact the possibility of getting a full-time librarian in each of our schools at all times, if that's possible.
As we go through the budgeting process, we'll review that legislation and then take a look at what we have for staff and how to decide how we'll go from there.
And the status on the social workers in our schools. I know that was another topic that we brought up last year, that they're going from school to school, and sometimes especially the middle schools, left without a counselor there, which was a little bit of a concern. You know, that's just, I think, an overall concern in the community, that some of these positions have been cut. Our teacher aides have been cut. Our librarians have been cut. Recently, music department. And those are very important positions in our schools. And I hate to see South Kingston have a gap there in those important positions. I'm not sure if that's been a great discussion among you.
We have. The mental health workers at South Kingston Schools, we have heard that from a number of folks, and we are exploring that.
Okay, I think there's confusion with the music. That was not a budget cut. That was based on student choice. So students, it's that we do have information on board docs that came to us during a school committee meeting. Over the course of the last, I think, 5 years, there has been a significant decline in student enrollment in band in particular. And so that was not a budget cut. That was not budget driven. That was driven by student choice. That band director has opted to work in another district, and we have a very strong commitment to increasing that program again and having students choose to be in the band again.
Right. I think it is important. I think as much as we want to promote the college prep, I think there are a lot of, kids that want the arts and want to go to college for arts, and I think having a strong arts program is important.
We have an incredibly strong arts
Yeah.
program. That particular
Yep.
band program at the high school had seen steady decline, and we're hoping that we can grow that again. We're hoping to recruit an incredible band director in order to do
Good.
that.
I think that would be amazing.
It would.
To kind of follow up on what Rachel was saying about library, you mentioned over the last 5 years that the band participation program has declined, and I can't help but wonder if that's with the increase in standardized testing in the portfolio and all the new requirements for students, if perhaps their electives, that's not really a viable choice for them anymore. So I'd be interested to see how that relates to the decrease in arts. And I was also looking at the PARCC scores, which can't commend you and our teachers enough on these incredible scores. It definitely shows how South Kingstown stands out. But the literacy at the high school, at 38% for the score, and I know that a lot of, if you look at the, underneath the top 10 is 50%, so the scores weren't remarkable across the board, but do you think that class size has anything to do with the lower scores on that? I know the high school's looking at class sizes of, I think I heard somewhere in the 25 to 26 child range, and I'm just interested to see if the staffing at the high school is adequate for the amount of students we have.
So at the high school, when students get to that level, they need to have teeth in the game. So there needs to be a reason to do well in the test. So I think across the state we found that high school students didn't perform as well as we expected them to perform because there really wasn't, it wasn't like it was a grade that they were going to get for it. So one of the things we're exploring, particularly at the high school and the middle school, is some kind of incentive to motivate students to really give it their best. So we think that was a big piece that played into that. The other thing is, this was the first year that we took tests online. We did not take them online at the elementary level, but we did at the middle and high school. And so it's hard for students to really perform well when it's not something they naturally do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
So we actually expect our students to perform better in this upcoming year through the one-to-one initiative because they're used to composing on the computer now.
Oh, good.
So I think that's some of the reasons. I'm not so sure. I think the class sizes at the high school, I believe, are pretty good.
Are they?
I think there's very few classes that have high numbers.
Okay, great.
In a related question, last year we talked about sort of the gap that exists between the normal student population in special ed and Title I. Do we have those figures broken out for the park, or is that not available yet?
We do. We can bring that back the next time we meet. We didn't put that in the slide, but we do.
Yeah, I think last year we just saw sort of a distressing widening of that gap, and I just wanted to see what the trends show this year. Okay.
I am aware a lot of the schools are functioning with empty classrooms. That's been an overall, and I know there's been a declining population. I think reconfiguring our schools so that we have Curtis Corner and Broad Rock has impacted the numbers at our elementary schools, especially because we've pulled so many of the kids out of there. I know it's not a popular thing to talk about, and I certainly love our elementary schools as they are. I'm just curious if you've ever had the discussion about potentially closing Curtis Corner, putting some of the children back down, putting 5th grade back down to the elementary schools, and having Broad Rock be 6, 7, 8. I know that might not be popular to talk about potentially closing a school, but I'm wondering, budget-wise, if that at some point would be fiscally responsible.
We did respond to your request last year to talk about that. We had on our agenda 1 or 2 times an RFP. And as the school committee was talking about it, we really weren't clear what exactly you all were looking for. And I think for me, I'm having a hard time reconciling closing any town building when we're building a rec center. I think that's a hard pill to swallow. So I think we talked about it in terms of putting an RFP out to examine the buildings to deliver the best possible education to our students, because right now we're not hearing the outcry that we were hearing when we were doing 0% tax increases about saving millions of dollars by closing a building. And again, I'm having a hard time thinking about that when we're building $1 million building. Or more.
But we're also functioning a lot of schools with empty rooms.
So I
and-
guess we needed clearer direction from you all, because that's not something that we're hearing from the community, that they want a school to be closed. So we didn't really feel like we had clear direction from the town council about what exactly you were looking for. And so that's why the conversation at the school committee
Well-
table kind of went around in a circle.
Right. I just think that if you're looking at overall, saving money, you might come back and say, that's not going to do it for us. I just think that would maximize our elementary schools. That would hopefully reduce on transportation. That could be a solution.
The savings in closing a school is staff. It's not the building, it's staff. So it's a librarian, it's a social worker, it's a school nurse, it's a building principal, it's the building itself is not where the savings lie.
Well-
So that is something that we certainly have in our plans to discuss in the coming year, but it's not something that we've heard a huge outcry from the community that they want us to look at. It just isn't. So if you have further clarification as a town council as to what you would like the RFP to look like, we're happy to look at that.
Has there been a recent facility study on those? I'm just curious.
We did have a facility study in order to that was approved by RIDE for our capital plan, which was done, I think, 3 years ago.
Am I, okay, I'm sorry. On this discussion that now we're hearing, again, town council suggesting that we look at closing a school. I think, from where we sit as a school committee, and I guess it's hard to think of making a decision like that without having a study that gives us a recommendation of specifically which school, right? But that costs money, right? And I remember as a community member watching this process a few years ago, right, where there was a study done and it recommended that the most, given the population and the distribution, and it made the recommendation that an elementary school should be closed. And of course, that was very unpopular with the community. So that money that was spent on doing this professional study, in effect, went nowhere, right? Correct? So, but are you saying that so what I hear is that you're saying look at specifically closing a specific school. But that might not be what a professional study would demonstrate is the right decision to make for the children of this town.
That's true.
I think part of the issue is I'm sure you all have paid attention to what happened in Warwick, and we could very well get a study, and it could come back and it could say something that is unpopular not only with the community but unpopular with you all and with us. And we've spent $200,000 to find out we don't want to do what they say we should do. So I think it's hopeful to say, can you look at when can we close Curtis Corner Middle School?
Right.
And how can we put this configuration of students in the buildings that we have? It's hopeful, but it's not positive that that's what's going to come back. So that's something that, again, I talk about unintended consequences, about what could come back.
Right.
And what we need to be ready to do. And I'm not hearing it from the community. I'm not.
Well, I just am hearing a lot of the, talk about empty classrooms and an extra space. I mean, I certainly love all our elementary schools, and I think that knowing our community, we did build a brand-new building with Broad Rock, and I do think it's been underutilized. We haven't really, we've tried different configurations there, having it just 6th grade, and I don't think that that building is being used as it was possibly intended to be when it was built.
I think if you're asking, and if it's a town council ask, that the school committee did talk about, are we using our buildings to the best of their capacity to deliver the best education to the children of this town? I think that is something that we talked about putting out there for an RFP, and it could come back and say, you know, move 5th grade back down to the elementary schools, have a 6, 7, 8, but we don't know what's going to come back. Again, what we're hearing, what we've heard, what I've heard loudly at the last 2 meetings, and we're not presenting you all with any additions to programs in this budget, but it's a process, and we're in the very beginning of the process, and we've had jam-packed meetings of parents telling us to expand. So,
Right. I mean, I've certainly heard the dual language immersion wish, which was one of the concerns last year when it was rolled out to us, that there were several of us that felt that it was not an equitable solution. But you all convinced us that it would be, that everybody could access it, that they had opportunity to go to these other schools to take advantage of the program. And, you know, the buzz that I'm hearing is people aren't really happy with that. They want it at their home schools, which is understandable. I just, you know, I appreciate that you're not bringing that to us right now, but I can see their need and their want for it, because we all want to stay in our neighborhood schools, and they all would like to have that. You know, I still, as I said last year when we talked, I would love to see Spanish teachers at each of the elementary schools so that all the kids could have access to some form of foreign language. That would be great.
You know, my recollection, recollection of the dual language discussion last year also was a concern from the town council that would not be successful. And so part of the decision to start at our Title I schools was that it was to demonstrate a belief among the leaders of the school district that it would be successful, and it has been successful.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I think we did talk about putting an RFP out there to evaluate the use of our buildings, and sometimes my memory, truthfully, is not as good as it could be. But I'm not aware of us formally as a school committee saying that we weren't going to do that. So I thought it was discussed by the boards. We did talk about the school committee, and then I don't know, it just seemed like we stopped talking about it. I don't think there was any formal decision not to do it. So I kind of felt like there was a commitment made by the school committee to look at it. That was a commitment that we made to you. I don't think that we followed through on that. And I just, you know, I've been trying to get the school committee, and I've talked about this in these joint meetings too, the transportation costs. I just think that it is related to configuration, and when the 5th graders were moved, we were told it was a budget neutral move. But since that's happened, the transportation costs, you can see it. I mean, the oldest year has dropped off, but I think that the year of 9, 10, or 10, 11, it was like 3.2 million. And right now it's 4 million. So it's gone up 800,000. And, you know, that's really basically, you know, it benefits the children because it gets them to and from school safely. But it's not really an educational, a direct educational benefit. So I think it's in everybody's interest to figure out why that increase has happened and what we can do to get that cost down. And it may be related to school configuration.
Well, I don't think anybody here at the town council table is demanding that Curtis Corner be closed. I think people are just looking for an estimate, would it create savings for the school department? I think that's information that you'd probably like to know, because it looks like you're going to be looking at $1 million of cuts if it goes through. And, I think parents and you guys would rather have teachers in the classrooms than having to support a building that's costing money or something like that.
Again, I'm going to say this again. The savings in closing a school is personnel.
Right.
It's not the building. It's the people in the building. It's the administrator, it's the librarian, it's the music teacher, it's the school nurse, it's the school social worker. Just to be clear,
Well, if I may, I think that you would probably lose administration. Our librarians are already not full-time, so I think that you wouldn't lose one. You would just keep her, and now we would have a full-time librarian somewhere. Our social workers are spread thin. They would then be at one school and not have to move around.
then you're not getting the savings that you're looking for. You're just closing.
Well, you always get some savings. You'd get savings on transportation, you'd get savings on administration, you'd get savings on the building itself, building maintenance there. I do think there would be.
We are still responsible for maintaining the building. We've maintained South Road since its closure, so
Right.
we are still responsible for maintaining. I think what I'm hearing is that we're going to come back as a school committee and talk about what the RFP is going to look like, and that conversation hadn't ended. It just, like I said, ended up in a circle because we weren't really sure what you all were looking for.
And honestly, it may not be the answer. It just is a question, it's a thought that, and you could come back and say, you know what, that's not going to be where we're saving money. I'm just offering it as a suggestion to look at. When you're looking at a budget, I'm trying to look at all the facets of it and the possibilities, and this is our opportunity for that discussion, so.
Where do you think I'm sorry, Keith, did you want to go? Okay. Jonathan brought up a good point about your transportation costs. Have you analyzed why that's gone up over the last few years so significantly, or do you have any idea, what do you think that the cost increases there?
Cost increase with the transportation budget has been just the increase that we send, the regular 3% in the cost of transporting our students. We need to keep in mind that South Kingston is 64 square miles, which is the second largest property mass in the state, which drives our transportation costs. We did just go out to bid for that transportation cost. The good news is the bids did come in as it relates to the in-district transportation, where there was minimum increase in districts. So the increase this coming fiscal year, I don't anticipate being as high as we've seen in previous years. However, we have seen an increase in our out-of-district students, which also drives some of the transportation costs. And that is, the out-of-district students are transported via a statewide system.
Okay.
I believe, and I'm gonna look to some of my fellow members. As I recall, when the 5th grade went to Broad Rock, we added a tier to the busing system because we had high schoolers, lower grades, and it was, do you recall that, or am I incorrectly recalling that?
I think what happened is when our current superintendent came, she didn't feel like the busing system that we had, regardless of the configuration of schools, was safe for students. We had middle school students making a transfer at the high school, and she felt like that was very dangerous. So that change happened maybe even before the reconfiguration of schools. She made a decision as superintendent of schools that that wasn't the safest option for our students. And so rather than have those middle school students making that transfer.
And I certainly appreciate your responsibility as to the budget, and we certainly have a responsibility to the taxpayers' dollar also. But the beginning of our presentation was presenting you with our mission statement. Our mission statement is really a focus on the quality of the education we're providing to our students. And I'm saying that in the context of cost savings needs to be weighed against the educational experience. We could certainly remove $5 million right here and now. It would have a very significant impact. So the question is, at what point is the education being affected, and at what point is that dollar savings simply a dollar savings and a detriment to the education of the students? I think there's a lot of data presented here that the educational system is moving in the right direction. That's not to suggest there's not room for improvement and ways to change things. But my focus isn't on saving money. If we can save money and continue to move our educational system forward, I'm all for that. I think there's areas in our, Abel, I think you hit it. I'd prefer to spend money on teachers than on bus monitors. That's where my head is. We don't have the option of that. That's a state mandate. But I'd rather see $400,000 put into the classroom and removed from the bus. Now, the community may say differently and say, no, we want those bus monitors and we want to spend our money that way. So be it. I'm just identifying the difference between cost savings in the classroom and cost savings in efficiencies. And I recall when we were going through closing an elementary school, again, the cost savings was not in the building. The cost saving was in the personnel. And if you're just moving personnel from one building to another, there is a cost savings. But it's not that significant. I remember something along the lines of $300,000, $250,000 in closing a building because you just had moved the employees somewhere else. And that's where I go, that $250,000 in savings is going to have a very radical effect on the education. Now, if we got to a point where our population is such that we can close a school and it won't have an adverse effect, I'll be the first one in line going, well, let's close the school. Again, personally, if there was a synergy between the town council and the school committee to go, hey, why don't we use one of your school buildings as our rec center, there would be a synergy there. I don't know if that conversation will come forth, but you can see an idea of where I'm going, where we already have a pile of bricks with rooms and a basketball court there. Rather than building a new one, maybe allocating some of those funds and redoing Curtis Corner to be a new rec center would be a win-win. I don't know if that's doable or if it's even a good idea. I think it would be an entertaining conversation.
I kind of look at the Broad Rocks Middle School and think it's underutilized. I right now think we had to pull fifth graders out. I mean, now all the schools aren't full because we built Broad Rock. And if you're going to talk about the rec center, I think, imagine if that were underutilized. There would be an outcry. I don't see the outcry for Broad Rock. And we just built that big, beautiful new building, and it's underutilized. And because what you've done is you've pulled, now you've got empty classrooms in all our elementaries. Our schools aren't even remotely close to capacity. They have recess rooms in all the elementary schools because they're not full because you just pulled all the kids. We do have a beautiful new school. I love Broad Rock Middle School, but it's certainly not being utilized as much as it could be. And I think 5 years from now, if the rec center was not being utilized, there would be a big fuss about it.
I guess that's my concern. I guess that's, perhaps we share a concern. Looking back to, when was Broad Rock made? 15 years ago? 17 years ago? Something like that? There was an increasing student population. We were running out of room. Now, this is what I'm being told. This is a long time ago. This is 17. So there was a need for it. I believe shortly after we moved forward with Broad Rock, there was a limit placed on residential building permits. And that's what I would identify again as a synergy between the two committees, that if we were going to limit residential building permits and build a school for capacity, you could see how 15 years from now, maybe we shouldn't have built that. Maybe we should have held off so that 5 years from now, we don't go, why did we build that rec center?
Steve wants to say something.
We're going down a slippery slope here because you're incorrect. The town had a ordinance in place for the limitation of residential. It went into effect for 1 quarter. There was never any stop of residential construction. The zoning ordinance has limitations as far as how, what land is left to be developed, but it had nothing to do with the school. The school was built at a time where the bond issues went out when the schools were still growing. While the school was in construction, we started to see a decline in enrollment, just as every other community that's a suburban community in the state. I mean, we can continue to discuss the issue of whether closing a school or keeping 5 more schools, but I think you need to refocus. The real question is, you've presented a performer tonight, and the discussion between the council and the school committee needs to be, how do we continue to work together? There seems to be, some animosity that's being developed here that I don't think is good for the community. The real discussion is, if you're presenting a budget that says that 2% we're $1 million over budget, and we're not presenting any new programs, then what we need to talk about is, how do we go from here? It's not a question of, obviously, school buildings and facilities are something that can be discussed as part of an overall discussion, but they shouldn't be the end and wherewithal. And certainly, when we start presenting facts that really don't have any place in our history, we really start getting off on the wrong foot. So I would suggest that the real focus here, both on the town side and the school side, is that if we're trying to prevent large increases in taxes, and each of us are forecasting in excess of what target numbers are that we're trying to talk about tonight, is that both sides are going to have to look at, well, what can we do without, or what do we have to do to be able to give the community the best education program and the best municipal services. Whether people on the want to jaw back and forth on buildings that are worth $250,000 open or closed is fine, but the real problem is you're forecasting on a 2% increase being $1 million over budget at this point with no new programs. Those are the things that need to be discussed. I'm sorry, but we're getting off on the wrong track here.
Yeah, and I don't, thank you, Steve. I don't know if we're going to get, obviously, to the end of these conversations. I do think this has been a good beginning. I look forward to seeing what that $1 million deficit turns into in terms of cuts. You know, I fear for teachers that we might lose. So I think that's what we're curious about, and that's what we're going to see going forward. Are there other comments from the council on any different issues than what we've covered so far?
I'll just make a general statement, and I'm speaking for me and not the rest of the council. I view my duty here is to be fiscally efficient, and in partnership with you, provide the best education that we can for the dollar. So just a general statement, and again, from me, I'm not speaking for anybody else.
I think, too, Abel, it's just important, Mary Ann did read the anticipated outcome for this evening, is that the town council and school committee will give direction to the superintendent and the CFO on the estimated property tax transfer to schools on which the budget will be built. So I think that brings it back around to what we're talking about tonight.
If I may just ask a question, and it's one that I'm sure you'll enjoy talking about. If you said the dual language immersion right now is a success, if you could expand on that, because I'm sure we're all interested in hearing about it. Last year, when you rolled it out, we were very curious, that and the laptop initiative, and I know it's not been a full year, but we would certainly be interested in seeing how those programs are going, how the feedback you're getting on both.
Mary Ann's going to take that back, and she's going to get that information and bring that back to you all for the next meeting.
Thanks. All right. Well, seeing no other comments at this point, I'm going to open it up to the public for comments.
Jim O'Neill, Matunic. I appreciate all of your service to the community. I know the schools represent better than 3/4 of our budget, and I appreciate the parents and the kids and the mission and what you have to do. I also appreciate the fact that the business I'm in, which is real estate, a lot of people are hurting. And I never hear that discussion come up here at the table. Steve came the closest to it tonight. For 15, 16, 18, 20 years I've been here, it says initial budget hearing. And we sometimes forget about that. So I'm glad to hear you're talking about dollars, what can be done on behalf of both taxpayers and the best education delivered. And also, too, as a side comment, I'd like to tell you that I think our teachers do a fabulous job. If the PARCC test scores are any indication, we're certainly one of the better communities in the state. Apparently our teachers know how to teach and know how to make our students enthusiastic about learning. And I think that's wonderful. But I think our teachers could do that in a treehouse too, because it's a skill level. Which brings me to the equation I have asked for the last 6 years. I followed Dr. Hicks 6 years ago. And Dr. Hicks said, and I'm not going to read you the 3 paragraphs, that we could close Curtis Corner School, open up South Road to a full either K through 6 or a combination of 6 grades at the 5 elementaries. And I've been talking about that ever since. When I talked last year about closing Curtis Corner, I said let's open up South Road to a full K through 6. We can do it. The numbers are such now that we just cannot close Curtis Corner. We just can't squeeze everybody in, and I'm with that. So this may be a 2-prong attack, that you close Curtis Corner now, open up, and Reza, you wrote this in a letter. I've got it here. I don't want to read it. A year and a half ago, you said it could be done, and this is what we need to do. So maybe a 2-step approach. And if the population keeps dropping, if we get down to 3,000, like the NESDEC people forecast in 2020, maybe then we have to consider closing an elementary school. But in my business of real estate, there is no one who doesn't want to have that South Road school opened up. They want their local, regional, neighborhood elementary schools, all 5, reopened. 100% of them. That's what they want. Whether it's K through 6, K through whatever combinations. That's what your parents want. And I don't know what the problem is here. Dr. Hicks thought we could save, at that time, $650,000 by moving into the full South Road category. And I'm just surprised this has been brought up time and time again. Your own Dr. Mega, a year and a half ago, said the same thing. We are over-facilitated. Former president of the school committee. He said that clearly. He knows it. We all know it. So how can you ask for more money from a taxpayer? I don't care if it's $1 million, $1.5 million, $1.8 million. You can't ask for more money when you're making no effort whatsoever to see if money can be saved by this movement that Dr. Mega, former Superintendent Dr. Hicks, what I've said and what I think you've heard from other people in this community. I don't want to see a petition for a referendum to reduce your budget by $1 million next June. And you're playing with fire by not showing some example here by what are the possibilities here to get our continued great education. But how can we show the taxpayers that we are managing our facilities and we care about the cost of the taxpayers? Because you're all dreaming if you think we're totally out of this recession. This state is still hurting. The new pension numbers, Steve was right, they're down another % of unfunded ability with the settlements from last year. We've got individual cities and towns in this state that are probably going to need efforts from the wealthier communities like ourselves, those that, quote, have better tax capacity. I think you're not looking at the big picture, and I think you have to. And I brought up last year, you saw it on the slides again tonight. 6 years ago, we got $10.5 million from the state of Rhode Island for state aid for education. 7.5 this coming year. I'm just giving you round numbers here. $3 million that you've had to make up off your students' backs. We've had to make up off the taxpayers' back. $3 million. Hey, holy cow. And, that's a lot of money here. A lot of people are bragging about the fact that, hey, we kept the last 5-6 years, our school budget's only averaged about 1% up. You forget about the previous 7 years. I've got all the figures here. 2000 through 2006, we were 9.1%. Add another year, 8%, 7%. But if you average up the last 15 years, we've averaged over 4%. Mr. Alfred was on the front page of the newspapers when it came to structural deficits and overspending in those early years. We're still suffering from a little bit of that. So when I talk about closing a school, closing Curtis Corner, but opening up South Road, yes, you may take out an administrator and maybe a couple staff, but basically you're keeping the same folks. So that isn't a personnel hurt. That's just showing management of facilities. I see nothing wrong with you pursuing that. And last year, I really thanked Dr. Stringfellow because she put together, the first time ever, I've seen a great report. And a couple of members of the town council said, boy, this has got to be a discussion next year. We're spending per pupil here about $18,300, $18,400 current year. North Kingstown, with their budgets, around $15,500. Just to give you numbers here, from Barrington, we're spending between $10 and $12 million more, and that's taking out $2 million advantage they have over transportation. We're spending $17, $18 million more than Cumberland, $12 million more than North Kingstown. Something's wrong here. Something is very, very wrong here. And Steve showed you a lot of numbers tonight, but numbers are, when it comes down to taxpayers, it's really incredible. Let me give you another example. We have, Steve, you heard tonight on the show up here, $330,000 our average home value. If you go with your increase this year and add our Union Fire Department tax into it, we'd be about $16.70 for a $330,000 home. We're looking at $5,600. Go to Narragansett, you can buy a $500,000 home with a $9.94 property tax, which includes their fire department. Does it ring any bells with numbers here? I hope you're hearing what's happening. It's only $1 more in Charlestown with the Charahoe Regional. It's only $1.50 more than Westerly. So we've got to take care of our own. But the thing is, you're not looking at the value of the taxpayers and the whole state here, because there's no reason why the government should ever help us out with the education funding formula when we are so over the top. And that's why they took money from us originally. I remember Mrs. Grist down here saying, my God, you guys got money to spend. You're spending $3,000, $4,000 more per student than anybody else in the state.
Jim.
Anyway, you're not going to do that. Abel, you can't do this 5-minute stuff, but I'll make it as quickly as possible. What you do, if you go to 2.5%, you are starting a new compounding that you'll never be able to back away from. And I hope this council understands that. In Jovili last year, you asked Steve Alfred, gosh, is that really the momentum of fewer kids? 4,383 kids in 2000, 3,253 this year. But this year includes 111 pre-Ks. It's really 4,383, about 3,150. Think about that. You've got a lot of work to do. You can't give a penny more in this budget until the school committee shows you that they can manage facilities and will help reduce the cost of education here while maintaining a quality education, because our teachers obviously do a great job. So let's work on the facilities. Thank you.
I'm Rachel Dahl. I have a kindergartner at Peacedale in the dual language immersion program. I just want to thank you for the program. I don't know how to say how it's going except great. And also I have some notes from a mom who couldn't be here. She's a Wakefield parent, but she chose to send her son to the program. And so she was talking a lot about the multiculturalism of the program. And she says, so her name is Angela, and it says, It not only teaches children another language, it encourages a multicultural outlook for their world around them. My husband is originally from Haiti. He speaks French and Haitian Creole. Our kids live with multicultural influence every day and have heard their father speak another language frequently. This program gives them another opportunity to be open to other cultures and languages. And then she goes on to say, I'm honored to live in a community that sees them as the importance of this program, to implement it, and even more honored to see our community and you, the town council, to continue to support it as necessary for it to expand. It will be most certainly benefit our children and their future for a lifetime. It is so much more than just learning Spanish. It is also about equipping them for a future that will be different than what we have experienced. In order for that, we must be willing to invest in it. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephen Licht. I'm the parent of a kindergartner and a second grader at Wakefield Elementary School. I just wanted to take this chance to publicly express my appreciation to this school committee and to the town council for supporting the dual language program. Even though my children are not enrolled in the program, I just wanted to express my support for continuing it and, if possible, to expand it. I should say that with my first grader at Wakefield and making the choice between sending our kindergarten to Peacedale or to Wakefield, we really agonized over this decision. It was a very difficult decision, and ultimately we chose to keep our two children in the same neighborhood school. But thinking about it later, what I realized was I never expressed to anyone publicly that we were going through this, that we saw the dual language program as incredibly valuable. And again, you've seen there, I think there are 18 families that were in the Wakefield district who sent an entire class full of kindergartners to Peacedale to take advantage of this. So I guess anecdotally I know of other parents who were in this same situation. So if anything, the support for the dual language program has been underrepresented by the enrollment at Peacedale and West Kingston. I recognize that, my children, we may have missed the boat, right? But we were a little early, so we might not be able to enroll either one of our children in this program, but I do want to express my support for it because it shows that South Kingstown is a place where we're really thinking about how to educate our children, thinking forward, working towards a better education. And I think that will show dividends throughout the rest of the program in encouraging people who really care about their children's education to come to South Kingstown and to keep their children in the school system here. So that, once again, I'd like to thank the school committee and the town council for the support of the dual language program. Thank you very much.
Need to lower this a bit. Hi, my name's Nicole Melanofi. I have a daughter in preschool at Skip, or pre-K, and then next year my other daughter will be in preschool at Skip as well. And I'm in the Matunic School District, and I'm also struggling with the decision that if they do not expand it to the other schools, I'm going to have to take my child and put her into another school. We moved here 9 years ago. We chose Matunic. We've kind of built, our daycare in that area, and now I'm going to have to find different childcare for my daughter. There's been at the last school committee meeting, there was an outpour of other parents from Wakefield and Matunic who would like to see this expanded. And listening to these conversations today and seeing that transportation costs for busing has increased over the years, and especially in recent time, the cost for fueling the vehicles has gone down, and I can only imagine if there's empty classrooms. I don't have students in Broad Rock or Curtis Corner or in the elementary school now, but if I'm hearing that they're empty, it just doesn't seem to make sense that you're not consolidating to try to save on transportation and reduce your budget somewhere so that a program that is beneficial, we're a global country now, and I do a lot of work internationally, and I see this need of having the ability to speak different languages. And I have friends that have grown up in Europe, and they've brought with them many different skill sets in being able to speak 2 languages, and then they can do 3 and 4, and being able to communicate with individuals in South America and Mexico and in Europe. It really brings more capabilities, and having that for our students and investing in them at kindergarten when they're so able to learn this and be able to bring that as a life-changing. I wish that I had that opportunity and was there, and I'd like to see that it gets expanded so that all students, and they don't have to, for me, another concern is if I did choose to, because I'm in Matunic go into West Kingston. How am I going to get my daughter there? There is no busing for them. So how am I going to, I'm going to have to find a closest bus stop for her. I'm going to have to drive her to school. So that makes it very difficult as a parent. If this program is available to me in my district, how am I still going to get my child there? So it's something that if it seems like there is opportunity to reduce your budget by looking at your operation expenses and looking at these programs that are beneficial and do help. I mean, this is a great program. There's not a lot of towns in Rhode Island and even in this nation that are offering this program. And really, I think it's something that we should commend ourselves for that has happened. And just further expansion of that would just be beneficial. So thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jen Silbert, and I have a daughter in the 3rd grade in Matunic, and I have a daughter in the 6th grade at Broad Rock. And so I would not benefit from dual immersion. My children have missed the bar. However, I'm reflecting back when I was 16 years old. I grew up in Vermont, moved here about 13 years ago. Growing up in Vermont, I was given an opportunity to travel to Japan for a summer. I'd never been in an airplane. And I got the scholarship, and I went to Japan for a summer, and it has radically changed my worldview. I have an openness that I'm commended by in my professional work. I really believe that dual immersion is a critical first step to understanding differences, period. It's about culture, it's about diversity, but it's about understanding the other in that I am the other and we are actually all in the same boat. And if you read any headline, any front page, any news that's local or national, we could not be standing at a more critical juncture than right now in being in a place to really understand and appreciate other differences, right? So I'm here to express my hope that it will become a very top priority for really not just dual immersion, but really expanding our thinking for how we're taking responsibility and raising our children to appreciate those differences, even those critical first foundational steps like dual immersion allows. And maybe someday we won't even have to pay for bullying programs. Imagine that. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name's Lisa Jones. I have a 2nd grader at Wakefield Elementary School, and my daughter is at Peacedale Elementary in the dual language immersion program in kindergarten. I understand how Stephen was talking about how he struggled with the decision to split up his children or keep them in the same school, and we decided to split up our kids. And it's one of the best decisions I think we've ever made. My daughter has just flourished in the program, is very confident in her new skills, really takes ownership in knowing something over her older brother, and is really teaching the whole family a new experience in teaching us all Spanish together. And we really all kind of have come behind her and have jumped in feet first every night, doing her Spanish homework or going to a Mexican restaurant and reading the menus and just opening her eyes to different cultures, different different experiences. And I feel like we've afforded her an opportunity that she otherwise wouldn't have been able to have. And we really appreciate that you have stand behind the program and that you're continuing it throughout the year so she can continue to grow and enrich her education. And we really look forward to see what happens in the future. So thank you.
Good evening. My name's Chris Comiskey. I have a 5-year-old kindergartner at West Kingston Elementary, and he's part of the DLI program, and it has been fantastic. I can't thank both councils enough for exploring the opportunity to expand the DLI program and bring it to South Kingstown. It has been great for him. And I did see an article the other day that I think Providence is now exploring expanding the DLI program and bringing it there. I think we were at the forefront of it, and it's been a great program. So I've listened to a little bit of the back and forth about where we're looking at cuts, and, you know, this has been a program that was, you know, added, and there was added money put into it. And it has been well worth every penny that was put into that program. These kids are doing great. It's just amazing that you have a 5-year-old speaking Spanish. They love it. They have a reason to get up and go to school in the morning, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So as far as the cuts and, you know, closing some of the schools, I know there was some back and forth about facilities that we have that are being underutilized. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of information that we have available to us that, you know, how many classrooms are being underutilized? How many classrooms are empty? You know, we have that information available. I would assume we can get that from either a principal or an administrator, or, you know, can we take that information rather than paying for the $200,000 survey and present it to, you know, the public and, you know, to both councils, and see if there are some areas that can be cut and some areas that, you know, we can shift people around. I mean, if we only have 5 empty classrooms in a building, there's no physical way to, you know, shift these people around for, you know, 5 classrooms. So, I mean, it's, you know, a starting point. It's something that, you know, information that everybody can have, and it is available. So I think we just need to start somewhere and you know, baby steps. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Josh Daly. I'm a resident of Wakefield and a parent of a kindergartner in the dual language immersion at Peacedale. So I'd echo a lot of the comments on how fantastic the program is, how amazing it's been to see our daughter come home and sing and speak in Spanish and be so eager to teach us and have us learn it too, and the vision that it took to create that. So I think I thank you for that. I want to say from a different perspective, there was a point that there's an unexpected jump in the number of people who had kindergartners enrolled. Anecdotally, we didn't live in the town before. I grew up here. We lived in New Orleans for a while, moved back, specifically moved back to Wakefield to be able to send our daughter to the dual immersion program. I don't know if that's just me. I'd be interested to know if others, but I talk to friends who have young kids as well. I tell them that we send our daughter to a public school that has a dual language immersion program. They're they're flabbergasted. I work in Providence. I work with a lot of young professionals. I tell them that. They say, are you kidding? Like, this is, the public school system is doing this. So from both the perspective of the experience in the classroom and the multiculturalism of it, and the expansion of the learning horizons, I'd say it's wonderful. But then also from a perspective of what it means for the town to draw people here as well, and to have people look at us as a leader. I'm thankful for that.
All right, if there... Oh.
Sorry, there's 2 things that I forgot to mention the first time. One other point that I just wanted to make aware, or to think about not expanding it, is that when all the elementary schools do come together, there is going to be a bit of a segregation of those students that have been in environment that has had all of the signs in Spanish, and really, even those students in Peacedale and West Kingston who are not part of the dual immersion program are still seeing the effects of it with the signage. And then when they go into Church Corner, Broad Rock, however, it works out, now they're going to be exposed to that, where in their schools that it wasn't like that. So there's going to be something to think about in the future for that. And two, the discussion that happened, I don't even know how you make that work, but this whole, I don't know anything about this recreation facility, but $4 million for a recreation facility, if there's open spaces and classrooms and there's possibly a building that could be reformed to be a recreation center, I think that's something that should be considered. Again, I don't know what that really means in regards to working together, implications of that, but to me it just sounds like a kind of a no-brainer idea to start looking at how could you use town facilities for other purposes that might not be needed for for now. So, thanks.
My name is April Tessier, and I'm a Matunic parent, and my children are past the dual language age, so I don't get to take advantage of that, sadly. I've been a 100% supporter of the program since I first heard about it, and I am here to basically reiterate everything everyone said, but not say it out loud, because that will waste everyone's time. I think what everyone here would like for you all to take away is to really make sure that in this budget process, and it's not likely going to be this year, and I understand that, but that dual language within all 4 elementary schools is significant. Putting it in an additional 3rd school and not the 4th is not a possibility. I know the school committee knows that from their last meeting where the Matunic crew all showed up to let them know that. But we all really want this for our community and for our schools, and we understand there's some major budget issues to solve, and I don't do that, but we want you to know that we want the program, and we need you to make it a priority for us and for our kids. Thanks.
I thought they were all going to be laptop people coming up. All the high school kids are going to be here, like, the laptops are awesome.
Well, I guess at this point I'd ask if there are any new comments from the council or from the school committee.
I would just say, since we're not going to hear from the high school kids about their laptops, because they're not going to show up to tell us, it would be really interesting to see what feedback you have on that for us. I mean, I have heard from a few of the students that I know how it's going. I know there were some, things to work out in the beginning with the laptops going home, but I'm curious overall what's going on with them too.
We can bring that back as well. Our high school principal was here, but I think
Yeah, I saw him sneak
when
out.
his
Yeah.
kids didn't
Yeah.
come up and talk about the laptops, he figured he could go home to his family.
Yeah.
So we can bring it
Yeah, that's great.
And, oh, go ahead. You sure? And I was just curious, I'm sure that you labored over the decision not to expand the dual language immersion program this year. And I'd like to see just how much it does cost to expand, just to have that knowledge while we're looking over everything.
I think we're at the beginning of this budget, and I think the pro forma budget that was presented to you does not have an expansion of dual language. That does not mean that there's not going to be discussion about expansion.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just interested to
Yeah,
see
and
the
so,
figures.
Yes, those numbers definitely will need to come to us, and certainly will come to you.
Okay.
John.
Yeah, so, I mean, I understand, I just want to work off of what the town manager was speaking of, and I understand the need to kind of keep in the budget context for developing, next year's budget, to keep it kind of focused on next year's budget. Makes sense. But I do think that, the town council, school committee can work together, should work together, include as many community members who are interested, issues such as growth management and issues such as, to find out why people do opt out of our school system. There are bigger issues in play, and sometimes it's easier to not go there. But I think if it's not in the context of that budget year, then it is a discussion worth having, and I think that we kind of owe it to the community to do that.
Keith? Yeah, Keith. I think I'm looking forward to growing synergies between the school department and the town, and in a similar way that the town resources are used to plow the school's parking lots. I think that there could be resources that are at the school's disposal that could be utilized by the town, and both of our budgets can see savings. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
I know the budget process can be painstaking at best, and I say that because the bottom line in enhancing the quality of education, the quality of products, and the quality of services we bring to the table for our entire community is something that we want to continue to be top-notch. That being said, we're going to have to look into ways to keep the community happy, to keep the programs that we have in place that are allowing the opportunity for our children to not only thrive, but to develop and to teach other people in the community. So for that, kudos, because I hear nothing but positive things about the dual language immersion program. That being said, I'm very cognizant about taxpayer dollars too. I don't want to see any big cuts. We have such a quality town here, but I want to keep in the forefront of my mind making the best decisions along with recommendations from everybody on the school committee in terms of how to best, suit the people that live in this community. After all, we're all here because of the quality of life that we have. So I know myself, and I hope I can speak for the rest of the council, will commit to trying to give the best possible budget for the dollars that have to be spent to give you all the people and you all the families that live out there the quality that you expect from our town. So it's a double-edged sword sometimes, and I want everybody to be cognizant of that. I don't want to say you can't always get what you want, because that's not the way I feel. I want to be able to give exactly what we can to make sure that everybody feels that it's a package, a product, a service, and a town that really cares about the people and how our money is spent.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments from? Well, then it's about 9:30, and I guess we've been here long enough tonight. I guess we can adjourn. I just wanted to first say congratulations on the park scores. I think they came out well. Heard a lot of great things about the new programs, so congratulations on that as well. I look forward to continuing this process as we move forward. And let's adjourn.